Hey y'all, I'm Hope, and today I'm going to be wrapping up all of the books that I read in September. I'll probably go through these pretty quickly because I didn't read a lot this month and it was kind of a mixed bag for me. I read 4 books and I don't have like super strong feelings on most of them. Although I did like all of them, I only had 1 book that I really loved. I also want to get through this quite quickly because now that we're getting into fall, the light is not lasting as well. And to be honest, I just could not be bothered to drag the ring light in here today. So let's just jump into it. First book I read was Pale Horseback, Agatha Christie. This is very different from a lot of her other works that I've read. I haven't read a ton of Agatha Christie's backlist, but what I have read is mostly from the Poirot series, or there's another series and I can't think of the name of it, and it's not the Tommy and Tuppence ones, it's something else. But I've read like 1 book from another series, a couple of Poirots, and one other that I can't remember. But this one is very different. This one is in the Ariadne Oliver series, I believe, and it's very different in the sense that Ariadne Oliver is not the main character here. She certainly features in here, and she's like a mystery writer. She's like an Agatha Christie stand-in. She doesn't really feature all that heavily in this book. It's in this series about her, but she's just kind of there in the background. But the book basically follows these 2 different people who are both investigating this priest who has died. And the priest was killed and a list of names was found in his shoe. And both the police and this other guy named Mark Easterbrook, who is a historian who gets his hands on this list because he's like friends with the medical examiner and just happens to get into a conversation with him about it one day. They both sides of that become convinced that this list of names is like people who have been murdered or have been marked to be murdered. And it follows Mark Easterbrook in the first person, so it's like him telling the story of investigating this as he becomes increasingly obsessed with figuring out what this list is and how these people are dying and who's doing it. And his investigation gets like increasingly tangled up in his personal life and his personal relationships. And Ariadne is in here because she's like a family friend of his, and so he kind of calls on her some throughout the book to like talk things over and to get advice. So she doesn't show up a lot, but she is like important to his actual investigation. The other perspective is a 3rd-person perspective, and that's Inspector Lejeune, who is who's the like lead investigator on this case. And he pops in, I think he only has a few like actual sections of this book, but he pops in periodically so that the reader gets like the police's investigation report, so that you kind of know all of the evidence that's been found. So this is very different because a lot of the mystery, or at least a lot of the mystery from Easterbrook's perspective, is just finding stuff out via his social network. So there's a lot less like finding of physical clues and things to put together. So it's very different from the other work I've read from her, and I did really like it, but it's definitely not my favorite. I did think that the ending was clever. I think that the way that the murders are taking place is really clever. However, I don't think it's something you can guess on your own. You can kind of guess at the general mechanism of it, but you can't guess like the specifics. But yeah, overall, really liked this one. It's the last Agatha Christie I had on my shelf that I haven't read. I had a bunch that I unhauled a while back because I just knew I wasn't going to get to them. But I did want to read this one so I can watch the, I think it's Amazon Prime adaptation of it. So now I'm finally done with it and I can finally watch that. Then the next book that I read in September was How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi. And I absolutely love this one. This is the book that I gave 5 stars this month. This is a really well-written kind of blend of memoir and like critical nonfiction, because it's talking about what the title would suggest, how to be an anti-racist. But Dr. Kendi talks through it by talking through his own like journey towards anti-racism, like how he came to this understanding that he's at now, and how he got there and what is necessary to start thinking and behaving in ways that are anti-racist. And so I thought this was really brilliantly done because he did such a the way that he wove together his personal history, his family history, and then like American history and kind of elements of sociology and philosophy and all of that. It's just woven together in such a deft way that like it doesn't feel jarring when you're kind of moving between sections and like between ideas. So I thought that that was really well done. I also like that he provides like a little definition at the beginning of every chapter of the specific terms he's going to be using in that chapter, like specific big ideas. You get a definition so that you know at any point in the chapter exactly what he's talking about, and I think that can be really helpful in books like this. I think it sometimes happens when you're reading nonfiction that like the author is working from one meaning of a word and you're like understanding it a different way, so I thought that having those definitions was really helpful. On the whole, I think this is brilliantly written, and I feel like this book should be a required reading. Particularly, I like this idea that he has here, is that basically it's not possible to be not racist. It's not like racist and then not racist are the opposites. It's racist and anti-racist are opposites. That if you're not racist, you're still racist. You're not doing anything to work against racist ideas or behaviors. So I thought that that was really interesting. And also he talks a lot about how it's possible to, like, you know, be anti-racist in some ways and be racist in others, and it's a constant like effort of self-reflection and trying to root out racist ideas and racist behaviors in yourself. So I think this is a really useful text, and I'm really glad that I finally picked this one up. I'd been wanting to read it for a while, but just felt like I needed to wait until I was really in the headspace to get the most I could from it, and it's definitely a text I will be revisiting in future. I listened to this one on audio. Dr. Kindy actually narrates the audiobook, and I thought that was really well done as well. But I would like to go back to this one at some point and tab it and kind of highlight, because there was a lot of very powerful sections of this book that I would like to be able to revisit. So glad that I picked that one up. And I should mention, I read both of these. These were for Bookopalathon, which I was participating in, and I should also say that I completely failed at Bookopalathon. I had 6, I'd gotten one double, I think, so I had 6 rolls total. And so I read this one for, I got a community shelf, and the prompt I got was a used book. And then I think I read this one for, I could just look at my list. Oh, I got Randomize Your TBR, and I got number 19, and this is what came up. So those are the only 2 prompts I finished for this. I was also supposed to read Light from Uncommon Stars, Velvet Was the Night, Ashes of the Sun, and The Grace of Kings. I started Grace of Kings and I started Light from Uncommon Stars, and those were just not the books I was in the mood for, and I got super bogged down and I didn't finish them. This is also part of why I only read 4 books this month. But I am really happy with the 2 that I did read, because they both were ones that I ended up enjoying. Particularly, I got a new 5-star and a book that I'm going to use in future for reference. So on the whole, I'm happy, even though I totally like failed to complete Bookopalathon. Like, it was just a complete failure. But I tried, and that's what matters. Then the next 2 books I read, I don't have in physical copies. And the first one of these was Hammers on Bone by Cassandra. This is a very short little like noir novella, and this one was a lot of fun. It's also quite dark. It is a like eldritch Lovecraftian style horror noir detective fiction thing. I don't know exactly how to describe it, but it follows this guy named John Persons, who is a private detective, and he also happens to be an eldritch entity of some kind, and he's approached by this little kid who's like, hey, I need you to kill my abusive stepfather. And John Persons is like, you know, I'm a PI, I'm not an assassin. And the kid is like, yeah, but you kill monsters, and he's a monster. And so Persons starts investigating the stepfather and realizes that there is something much bigger at play, and has to try and deal with the situation without losing control of his own abilities, because he is also an eldritch being. But I really enjoyed this one. It's, like I said, it's quite dark, because obviously there is a content warning there for child abuse. The kid's stepfather is abusive, and this kid is, you know, desperately trying to get rid of him to protect himself and his little brother. So there is that to be aware of. I think there was also a brief, not explicit, but implied mention of sexual assault. So that is, you know, content warning for that as well. But I thought that the story was really well written. I really enjoyed Cassandra Kaw's writing. And the one thing I thought was really fun about this is that the whole story is set in like mid-2010s, like 2015, 2016 London. But the main character, John Persons, talks like he's in a noir movie or something. Like he just, that's how he speaks. And it seems to be, I think that it's a tribute to the person whose skin he's wearing. This guy was like a private detective in like the 1920s or something, and now John Persons, as like a tribute to him, continues to speak in that way. So I thought that was like a really fun detail, and it made it really it made the story have like a really interesting tone and feel to it. And I kept like forgetting it was set in 2015, 2016 London until some like really modern thing would be mentioned. And it didn't quite take me out of the story. It almost kind of made me laugh because it was just this like really interesting juxtaposition of the two things. So I can't say much more about the story because it is very short. I think it's like 60 pages. But if you like Eldritch Horror, I think it's one that is definitely worth picking up, and I believe there's a sequel as well, so I'm hoping to pick that one up at some point, because I ended up really liking this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. And the only thing that that took away that like star for me, and this might be something that if I revisit the book, I would give it that 5 stars anyway, was that I'm not super familiar with the noir genre, so I think there were some phrasings and some words that I just wasn't familiar with that kind of went over my head, and that made it a little bit difficult for me to follow the story at times, but that I think might be more of a me thing than a thing with the book. So highly, highly recommend it anyway. And then the last book I read was actually the weakest book I read. I read Final Girls by Riley Sager, and I'm just gonna give some brief comments here because I have kind of further thoughts coming up in an upcoming vlog project, so keep an eye out for that. But I gave this one 3 stars. I also listened to this one as an audiobook, and it was fine. I like to think of books on like a food scale. Like you have your kind of ice cream French fry books that are like delicious, they're easy to consume a lot of very quickly, get through them really fast, they're very fun, but they ultimately they don't like leave an impact, right? And then you have kind of stuff that's a little crunchier and a little more like you gotta think about it a little bit, a little denser, but like still not a difficult read. And then you have your like chewy steak books that are things that you really have to like spend some time with and chew on for a while and think about. And Final Girls very much falls on the like French fries and ice cream end of this scale. It is a very fun book. I listened to the audiobook very quickly. I got it, it took me 2 or 3 days, and one of those days I think I only listened to like 1 chapter because I was very busy that day. But it was like a 12-hour audiobook and I got to it extremely quickly. I listened to it at 2 times speed, and it was kind of neat because there were 2 narrators, and that helped with, I think, having the dual timelines. So this book is told through dual timelines. It follows a woman named Quincy, who is a final girl. She survived a massacre at a cabin called Pine Cottage when all of her friends were murdered, and this happened to her in college. And then there's these 2 other final girls who've survived other massacres, and the 3 of them have all been named final girls by the media, but they've refused to meet each other. And so this follows Quincy in the wake of the first final girl's death, when the other final girl seeks her out in the wake of that death and kind of turns Quincy's life upside down. And so oh, and also Quincy has forgotten the events of Pine Cottage. She doesn't remember like an hour worth of time. And so part of it is that her life is turned upside down because now she's being reconfronted with this like lack of memory and trying to figure out what actually happened to her. So I thought it was a really interesting premise. I think the execution was a little bit lacking. And again, I don't want to go into too much detail here because I do have like a much longer vlog coming up in the near future. But ultimately, I found that the characters were kind of meh. They were kind of inconsistent and a little bit flat at times, a little bit too flat for my taste. But I thought that the overall premise and the plot was pretty fun. The middle sections of the book dragged quite a bit. There wasn't much happening, and then I was kind of underwhelmed by the explanation given at the end. But the very, very, very end, I absolutely loved. So, on the whole, 3 stars, enjoyed it. It was a fun thing to listen to while I was working on some web updates and things for work. Yeah, I don't know that I would recommend it unless you just really love thrillers and you really love like the Final Girls premise. But I think that there are probably other books that do this better. So, I don't know. It may also be that you like Riley Sager's writing, in which case, yeah, definitely pick it up because it was good. It was fine. But those are all the books that I read in September, and I'm hoping to read a lot more in October. I do have pretty extensive plans for October, including 3 readathons I'm wanting to participate in, which I will leave my October TBR in the description below. But I want to know what your favorite book you read in September was. Or alternatively, what was your least favorite book you read in September? Did you read something you really loved or something you really hated? And if you made it this far and you don't want to answer the comment question, or you know, you just don't feel up to writing something but you do want to let me know you're here, leave a horse emoji in the comments for the pale horse. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I have enjoyed making it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.